Bills Mafia, what is going on? Good evening. Happy Thursday. How are we doing tonight? How's your day going? How's it been? It's been wild. It was hot. As a mailman, I've been sweating all day long for the past couple of days. It's been like 150 degrees here in Rochester, New York. But hey, we got a jam-packed show, a spicy show for you on the Cover One Network for Thursday night here on Buffalo Late Night. I'm your host, Thomas Toulouse. I'm ecstatic you're here. I'm glad you've decided to join us. We have a ton to talk about and nothing at all, as we are presently in the thick of the most boring part of the offseason. But hey, you've chosen to join us, so we got a lot to talk about. I appreciate you tuning in tonight, or if you're listening on Spotify, happy Friday to you. You can find our show free on all social media and streaming platforms, including Spotify, YouTube, or however you pod. If you are on Twitter right now, hop on over to our YouTube page, join the conversation. We would love to have you. Also, want to make sure you hit that subscribe button. How are you even going to know when we're live? Are you guys even going to know when we're going here? We want to have you with us every single time we're live. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Make sure you're hitting that notification button. It'll let you know every time we are live. And as per usual, super chats are a go for this and every Cover One show. So if you want to be heard, hit that button. Now, I do have some exciting news. I do have a couple of giveaways going on right now on my Twitter page. One for some Bills tickets, the other for a copy of Madden 24. If you go to my YouTube or my Twitter, you will find those links there. Come and win some free stuff. Everybody likes free stuff. Now, we are officially 2 weeks away from training camp, Buffalo Bills training camp, that to be exact. So make sure you're subscribed to Cover One, as well as the Cover One Pass for all the best coverage and analysis heading into this season. Guys, tonight we have some killer guests joining us this evening. First off, we have the host of The Smoke Break, guy that's been on my show probably more than anybody else thus far, my guy, Zbot, and half of the Bills guys, and one of the Cover One squad, Steve Mathis, better known as Judge Mathis. Fellas, what's going on?
What is happening, Thomas? Thanks for having us on, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Like you said, though, it is the dog days. So that's why we're having a little fun tonight, because I'm starting to lose my mind a little bit. But then I get back to being on course, feeling all right when I check, and I think we're right around. We might have just went under the 70-day mark till Bills football. So we're getting there at least.
Yeah, we're about 60.
Yeah, we are definitely getting close.
All right, 67. Okay. I think what I see was 10 Sundays from this past Sunday. And if you think about that, I mean, the fact that it's going to be here. So I can't wait. The summer usually always cruises. And I know for you, Judge, I mean, you're a teacher. It's got to fly for you. So by the time you're back to the old grind there. At least the silver lining with that, just for you, is that when you go back to work, you got that at least.
Yeah, see, I'm in the West Coast too, so West Coast does things a little bit differently. I actually have to go back to work on July 31st this year. I have students in my classroom in the month of July, and it's not summer school. I was not pleased when I saw the calendar this year, but you're right. Silver lining is it is a nice little distraction leading up to Bill season.
You got to have a talk with the board out there. Are they compensating me accordingly? At least that's ridiculous. Oh my God.
Yeah, it just so happened that Monday fell. It's usually the first week of August we go back, but that Monday fell right there on the 31st. So very, very unfortunate situation.
Steve, what do you teach?
I teach 10th grade world history and 11th grade U.S. history.
Very nice. Yeah. That's very exciting. Now, guys, for everybody joining with us, and I'm sure people will slowly trickle in while we're talking about the Bills tonight and covering all of the Bills off-season topics, we're also going to be playing a game on Jackbox TV because we can't keep on topic as it is. So we might as well throw a wrench in that wheel because I'm sure everything will go perfectly fine. So that being said, the first topic for tonight, Ian, why don't you throw the first topic up on the board while we're getting this game going? Now, guys, everybody that is watching, you can actually participate in this game. You'll actually see the opportunity in a few moments to join in. So let's talk about the Diggs situation. Obviously, this offseason has been quite frankly, surrounded by Stefan Diggs. What has happened in regards to Stefan Diggs and the continued drama? We had Josh Allen, who was with a bunch of bros talking about the current situation and what he thought and that it was overblown. So, Steve Z, what's your perspective on how this was handled, the whole situation, and how it's partaken in this offseason?
Let it
Yeah.
rip, Judge. Let's hear it.
I'll tell you what, like I've been trying to be a better person this summer. So I've been trying to be like less aggressive, especially to like other content creators and the national media and stuff. But like this is the one thing that I have been unable to sort of stay away from. And it's just the fact that like it just really makes me angry and upsets me that there are some people out there who it's just week after week after week, whether it's people I respect like Rich Eisen, or people I don't as much respect like Mike Flory on the national stage, or other content creators. Like there are people who literally can't go and create content outside of like fictitious Stefan Diggs drama. There was a Buffalo News article, I'm not going to say the name of the author, the other day, where they literally wrote like 3 paragraphs. These are all the 15 things. These could all be the bad things that happen behind closed doors, but we'll never know because Stefan Diggs refuses to talk to the media. Like just the stuff that people are throwing at the walls is just incredible.
It's an absolute joke. And the thing that's amazing is that it had to happen almost simultaneously with the biggest lull in all of sports. Like as soon as the cup in the NBA finals ended, there was a bit of a break there. And then you coincide this, like I said earlier, this dog day period where unless you're a big baseball fan, which I am not, there is just nothing. And when you're talking about the NBA and guys like what Judge just said, Flory, and I spoke about this last week to kind of talk about why somebody like him in particular has about 15 articles on this. I personally like Florio a lot. I listen to him a lot, but he's not covering, Victor Wembanyama, right? Or the NBA free agency. They are strictly NFL. There is nothing to talk about until DeAndre Hopkins or Dalvin Cook signs a contract. There is absolutely nothing to talk about. And when you have one of the best teams in the league, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and his relationship with one of the best wide receivers in the league, and that is potentially what we're being told, at least, on the brink of collapse, they're going to squeeze every ounce out of that lemon as they possibly can. The problem I have with it is we are finding now that we're going into the 4th week here, where it'll kind of die a little bit, and then something will happen. The flavor of the week here, which is just incredible to me. I've now seen today twice. I saw Florio comment on it. I saw Colin Cowherd today on his show comment on it. They're acting as though Sean McDermott, when Josh Allen said on Bussin' with the Boys there that McDermott asked Diggs to go home, McDermott told us that on that Friday, the day after it all happened. The day after whatever happened never happened again, and nothing outside of the Bills' locker room was an issue again. And now we are finding out 4 weeks later that all of a sudden is a revelation to people that are creating these articles, creating these narratives, and talking about this constantly. The one thing that this week in particular has really bugged me is that because McDermott said that himself. Who do you think told him to go home? I mean, it wasn't like no one said that he just ran out of there in a fit. I think it was a mutual agreement. And if it wasn't, he wouldn't have been there that next day. He was there less than 24 hours later, and nothing has come out of it since. And I have been a firm believer that if Stefan Diggs wanted it to be more of an issue, he would make it more of an issue. Diggs is not a guy that's just going to sit back and let the media fill the narrative for him. He wouldn't have gotten out of Minnesota that way. We know Stefan Diggs, and frankly, most wide receivers, that's the position in the NFL that this is most commonplace with. They speak their mind. And I kind of like that about the position because they always do what's in the best interest for them. They're kind of the face of that, so to speak. Diggs has not shied away from being that guy. And yet in this particular situation, I think outside of a lapse in judgment by McDermott and the organization for one day, they have done nothing. They have done nothing wrong or nothing worth of a headline. Yet we are going on a month where this is being completely exaggerated. And now all of a sudden it's a backhanded comment that Josh Allen goes on a podcast and says, hey, I'm actually friends with the guy. I'm teammates with the guy. I'm aware of what's happening. Unlike anybody else, there's nothing to see here. And that is, oh, he's disrespectful to the media. Oh, he doesn't value my career, my profession. No, probably not in the given moment he does it, because all day long, that's all that's going on when it comes to his life in the NFL. Him going on there and saying that to me was the best thing that could have happened. But of course, just like everything else surrounding this topic, that's been completely flipped on its head too, into another angle. So this whole thing is just an absolute joke. But I will say, we were talking about silver linings earlier a little bit and kind of finding the good with the bad here. This has been the only issue under McDermott and Bean that has been worth a headline going into a season that is quote unquote negative, so to speak. If this is the worst thing that these Bills have to deal with, fine by me. I just think it's quite sad that this is, of all things, this is the one thing that they're targeting in on to try and make a story when it's just clearly not. I would understand if Diggs held out for a week. Of course, we'd all be freaking out. I mean, boys, it was less than a day. I cannot believe we are still talking about this.
It's just so crazy too. Like the fact that like Thad Brown came out from, I don't even know what news station in Rochester, and said, well, Josh Allen, you're poking the hornet's nest. Don't be afraid. Don't be surprised if you get stung. Like, are you kidding me? Like, there are professional reporters out there, national and local, who have spent the last 2 months just making things up, projecting, guessing. Like, that's just laziness too when it comes to content creation. Like, you guys over there at Fanatics, you guys literally just got done doing the whole West Herd junket, interviewing players, having a really good time. I know Eric and Anthony, they got Gregory Rousseau in the film room. They got Kyer Elam in the film room. They're creating quality content. You're creating quality content. Dave and I, we're breaking down the roster, talking about training camp storylines. There are so many things you can do at a local level. And then at the national level, there are so many things that you can do with your platform. And they're just choosing. They're choosing the easy route. They're choosing to just, well, instead of putting the work in, I'm just going to use my imagination and just think of the most outlandish things possible in order to generate clicks. And that's just, it's bugged me so much this offseason, seeing people doing that.
Today at the end of Coward, and I know, like many of these guys, these talking heads, you either love him or you hate him. I've always loved Coward. I know that he is as polarizing as it gets. But today, him and McIntyre spent the better half of 5-10 minutes towards the end of the show legitimately discussing moving on from Stefan Diggs while he's still worth something, because no GM's going to want to touch him if this evolves into more of an episode. One, is Dalton Kincaid Travis? I mean, I'm hearing he might be, and I hope he is, but unless he comes out and he's the culmination of Gronk, Travis Kelce, Tony Gonzalez, and every other Hall of Fame tight end in the book combined, and breaks every record known to man at the position, who's getting the ball on offense outside of Stefan Diggs? If Stefan Diggs was not on this team today, nobody looks at the Bills the way that they currently look at him. They were having a legitimate discussion about moving on from him for a second-tier player simply to get rid of the distraction and get value out of him before no GM in the league wants to touch him. Let's see how that works out when you put him up on the block and every GM steps up and wants to touch him. I don't understand how I would get it if there was something there to extract. If Diggs came out and said, if he said something specific, if he like with RG3, the whole thing with him, he said that the problem with Diggs was one drive when the Bills already were going to lose the game. It was inevitable. And Diggs only got 2 targets on a drive where they were down 27 to whatever in that Bengals game. He says, I have on good authority or whatever, that was the issue. First of all, that was going on 5 months ago. The game was over. There's no way you win it. Even if Diggs breaks the single drive record, whatever that is, on that drive and gets in the end zone, they're not winning the game. That is not the problem. What the problem is, I have no idea. Unfortunately, Sean McDermott was thrown to the wolves, and he did misspeak. That is 100% true. And the way he walked it back, that just shows you that is exactly what happened, because he was like, what did he say? I'm concerned for all my guys he didn't know what to say. He knew he messed up, and he knew that the whole thing was getting completely exploded. And so he was trying his best to walk it back. The problem here is he said that he was very concerned. Everybody has ran with that one little quote, completely neglecting everything else anybody has said. And have you noticed, we're going on 4 weeks now talking about this, not one other thing, not one single other thing has come out of that locker room in a negative light surrounding this. Nothing.
Well, the best part about that, Zbot, is that you talk about how, they'd move on from Stefan Diggs. In the same sense, they talked about how we'd move on from Sean McDermott if they wanted to get rid of him. Yet, as if wide receivers or prolific head coaches just grow on trees every other day, that we'd be able to find another head coach. Yet the 17 years of having a litany of garbage head coaches, or how many times did we have good receivers? Oh, we had one, who in Sammy Watkins we traded up for in a draft that we never should have traded up for, who obviously had a drinking issue, a career derailed by injury. So outside of that, it's just Stefan Diggs. So the fact that they perceive that everything would just be hunky-dory and you could just jump to the next possible option, as if no other team in the NFL would want Diggs or no other team in the NFL would want McDermott, is just naive, or it's ignorant. The fact that these unbelievable assets the Bills would be willing to get rid of. And even more so, they talked about, Sean McDermott. And I don't mean to sidetrack, but then what was it? The next day he got his contract extension.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like RJ Melville in the comment section says, the Bills this year are the national media's whipping boy because they are lazy and know they will get clicks. Number one, everyone knows the number one fan base to get clicks out of, to get reactions out of, and it's to a point our fault, is Bills Mafia. Come at Bills Mafia and you will get clicks. You will generate clicks. All you got to do is say something stupid about the Bills and Bills fans will attack you. You'll get that engagement you're looking for. And there's just so much groupthink on the national level. And on the national level, these reporters look at the Jets, who are on the come up with Aaron Rodgers and all the weapons they add and that good defense they already have. They look at the Miami Dolphins with all that speed on offense and what they've added on defense with Fangio and Ramsey and David Long. They look at the Chiefs, who are the defending Super Bowl champions, the Bengals, who didn't get any worse, the Jaguars, who are on the come up, the Chargers, who are on the come up. There's all these really good teams in the AFC. And they're like, what's the one team that maybe could just like slip a little bit? And it's the Buffalo Bills. So on top of Josh Allen leading the NFL in turnovers, which a lot of it had to do with his UCL injury last year and the fact that he couldn't throw the ball short. He had to throw the ball down the field, which is just going to lead to more turnovers. On top of the fact that there is that Stefan Diggs drama, Von Miller coming off the ACL, there's all these different things that you can talk about in terms of they didn't add a marquee free agent like other teams did. There are all these different things that you can talk about. And instead of the national media doing some digging, really looking at the foundation of the roster, really looking at some of these smaller, more minor moves the Buffalo Bills have made, and realize that the Buffalo Bills were already good and got better. Like, instead of doing those things, they just bash on the Bills because it's the easiest thing to do. And because they think that like 6 months from now, the Bills will be the team this year that flopped of all these other teams. They're making a bet. They're like, oh, we're going to put our chips in that the Bills are going to look bad so we can clip this 6 months from now and look smart, or we can just forget it ever happened if the Buffalo Bills are successful. It's been a frustrating couple of months just because we're fans of this team. We love this team, and they've just 95% of the media has just been chatting all over them this offseason.
And in the midst of it all, Tyreek Hill gets charged with assault again, and no one
away in 2 seconds.
No one bothers to say, hey, maybe Miami wants to move on from this distraction. Meanwhile, Diggs misses one practice, and 4 weeks later, we're coming up with trade scenarios for the Bills because they got to get rid of this cancer in the locker room before no GM wants to touch him. The whole McDermott thing, it's kind of cut from the same cloth, where it's you look at the Bills and the success that they've had recently, and ultimately it all comes down to them not winning a Super Bowl. People forget very quickly that someone like me, 26 years old, didn't see a Super Bowl appearance until I was almost out of college, or excuse me, a playoff experience until I was almost out of college. This team has never been better in my lifetime, and it's not even close under this regime with these personnel on the field and, of course, in the front office. And Sean McDermott only gets defined by 13 seconds in last year's loss. He never gets any credit for anything that these Bills do in a positive way. Josh Allen gets all of that. Brian Dable got all of that before the departure. And now that, when there's negative things going on, including this, McDermott took a lot of the brunt for this, and I understand it, but do we even know how much of a role that he played in this? Do we even know that he even was aware that Diggs was upset to some capacity going into the OTAs? We have no idea. For all we know, he could have walked out to that podium just finding out the way we did and just kind of, it's a tough thing to do, to kind of go and face the music like that and tell a story on something that you're trying to be careful about, as far as not revealing too much about Diggs, the situation. So the whole thing looked bad. And I think that is why it's an awesome thing that Terry Pagula had done in that particular scenario. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to get ahead of the game here, put out some positive news, and ultimately sign the extension for Beane and McDermott when he did, because it was a vote of confidence for both those guys going into one of the tougher years that either of them have faced, especially Sean McDermott. This is the biggest year for him since he has taken over this team. But you also do it in a moment where everybody's saying, well, McDermott might be losing control of this team or whatever else. And I just don't understand how you look at the body of work that the Bills have done and you take this one very minute sample size and blow that up to where it's bigger than anything that these Buffalo Bills have accomplished over the last 6 or so years. It truly just when you think about it at its core, it makes no sense. I had mentioned that, and this is back to what you guys were saying about the clicks and stuff too, and this is why I understand it to some capacity. If this was Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, I would love this. I'd be all over it. I would click every one of those articles. I'd be like, man, this is great. This is great. So one part of this that you have to look at, is frustrating as it is, and it's been annoying the hell out of me. The reason they're doing this is because they're at the stature in which it's worthy of writing the article about. If this was the Arizona Cardinals, nobody would give it, nobody would give a rip. So that's why this is what it's become. And it's also just a casualty of the cycle in which we're in right now with sports and the NFL in particular. But when you look at it to its core, I thought maybe it would blow up a bit when it did and then kind of dwindle away after a week or two. The fact that we're 4 weeks in is what's really killing me. Nothing else has happened. That's what I truly don't get. Like, to its core, nothing else has happened. We don't even know what happened to begin with. And whatever it was, it could have been that big of a deal. I really think if it was a major problem, Diggs would not be just sweeping it under the rug. I genuinely believe that. So you sit here today, and I got to tell you, last year, and this is I'm like you, Judge. I'm trying to find the good in a lot of these things, because after the way the season ended last year, that was the lowest I think I've been as a Bills fan in a long time. And of course, that's saying something, because it never was anything but lows. But now the expectations are way different. And the way that they ended that season last year was just so bad in comparison to the expectations. What I'm loving right now is the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, the perceived health of Tua Tagovailoa, and then, of course, the just unbelievable talent all around the AFC. You said it perfectly. The Bills have become the proverbial whipping boy, so to speak, because it's an easy bet for these guys to get on, because, one, everybody's on it, and two, whatever has happened this offseason, the no blockbuster move, no Von Miller, right? No Aaron Rodgers, no whatever that everybody else has done. It's an easy thing to hang on to. The Bills went into the season last year with such high expectations that it was impossible to live up to. I'm loving going into this year. We have made those quiet moves that nobody's talking about. These Bills have gotten better that nobody wants to address. I've never been more excited to see some of the additions for a team in an offseason other than this year. I mean, I've never been more stoked to see some of these guys get out on the field. And they're going into a season where they're doubted. That's when these Bills are the best. So at this point, the positive I take from it is that it's just the negative that I can't get away from is just how ungodly annoying it is. Still finding a way to make this a thing.
And the thing too is like that is what the world is like today in this day and age. I can't tell you how many people have already made this comment previous to me, but imagine if the 90s, the bickering Bills were living in the social media generation, all the drama that would have been around those Buffalo Bills in the 1990s. But, you know, Harvey Dent in Batman, one of my favorite quotes of all time. The night is always darkest just before the dawn, right? The Buffalo Bills hit some lows last season despite all their success, and it sort of just dropped in that Cincinnati game. That could be the darkness just before the dawn. Everything that happened last season could have happened for a reason, because you can learn from that. It can culminate into something special this season. And that's one of the things that bugs me so much, is all these people are just peppering the Buffalo Bills, looking for their story. But what's going on between Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs? Everyone's calling it toxic. Everyone's calling it unhealthy. Everyone's calling it drama. But guess what? Winning championships and being successful and being winners, it's not a pretty thing, right? It's not some 1-2 step. It's not linear. There's a lot of arguing. There's a lot of bickering. There's a lot of that stuff that goes into it. Stefan Diggs wants to be a champion. Josh Allen wants to be a champion. Sean McDermott wants to be a champion. Von Miller wants to be a champion. They're all going to argue, and they're all going to try to get their 2 cents in. They're all going to push each other. It's not going to be pretty to try to win a championship. But because they're not high-fiving each other and smiling on the sidelines at every single second of every single day, because they're not getting along every single second they're on the practice field, people want to blow that out of proportion. But that's how winning gets done. People, it's not a pretty process.
Yeah, and there's also this weird expectation that the Bills are supposed to be unscathed or never have any issues whatsoever. I mean, they went from being a team that was a 17-year drought, and they went up the proverbial ladder, as every team does, right? They talk about the Giants last year, like, oh, Brian Dable led the Giants, and they made the playoffs, and they had a gutted roster. Well, that's exactly what the Bills did. They backed in, and they missed the playoffs, and they've slowly gotten back up. And yet the one thing that they never get any credit for is the fact that they got through all of that stuff last year. All the junk that they had to deal with emotional trauma, the injuries that people probably have never seen before. I mean, this Bills roster was, for the most part, relatively healthy since Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane have been here. Then last year they ran into the injury bug, and yet none of that gets talked about. It's the issues that keep jumping over and over and over again. And at what point do the Bills get credit? That's my concern, is that they get all the flag, but they're not getting the same credit where it's due. Yes, they got everybody picked them for the Super Bowl. But I mean, that's a pretty low hanging fruit, considering they added a Von Miller to a Super Bowl contending roster. Anybody would have had that expectation. But if you look at it right now, and Z, you just said this might be the best Bills roster outside of one of those 90s years. And this is absolutely the best roster that Brandon Beane has put on the field thus far. So to sit there and say that for whatever reason, and I've heard this time and again, the Bills are going to regress, it makes 0 sense to me. 0 sense whatsoever that the Bills are going to have issues and everything's falling apart and the house is on fire and nothing's going to go right. They're going to have a losing record. I've seen people say they're going to miss the playoffs. At what point do you sit there and say none of that makes any sense? And they've literally built themselves up to a point where they're going to be even more successful. I mean, they've gotten guys like Poona Ford to take next to nothing. They got Leonard Floyd, who's going to be their 3rd or 4th defensive end once Vaughn comes in. I mean, what are we talking about here?
It's low-hanging fruit once again, though, because the regression's an easy argument. They're going off back-to-back 13. I'm telling you right now, the Bills aren't winning 13 games this year. Well, look at that schedule. If they win 13 games again this year, I'm not going to complain about a thing again. Again, look at that schedule. Look at this AFC. And, of course, on top of all of it, you draw by far, not even remotely close, the toughest NFC division to play on top of all of that. It's low-hanging fruit to call out for a regression for these Buffalo Bills because the division has never been better. The conference has never been better. And they're coming off of back-to-back 13-win seasons. And you look at the schedule, and I personally believe that the regression talk is not based on what the Bills have done as far as getting worse. It's based on everybody else getting better. Nobody gives credit to Jacksonville. I think they could threaten the 1 seed this year just based on how bad their division is. Doug Peterson absolutely saved that starting core for Jacksonville under Urban Meyer that was supposed to be, the new wave here. He was going to absolutely sink the boat. Or Doug Marrone, or not Doug Marrone. Doug Marrone. Doug Peterson comes in, rewrites the ship. So you got Jacksonville. You have, of course, the Chiefs, of course, the Bengals. You now have two teams in the AFC East that you could argue on paper may have a better roster than the Buffalo Bills at the current moment. It's never been tougher in my lifetime for these Buffalo Bills to win a division where it was actually obtainable. It was never obtainable up until Josh Allen was playing quarterback for these Bills. So the regression argument is very, very easy. I have now heard Nick Wright, that's his big thing. And of course, he's made a living off of this. And I tip my cap to him because it's back to what Judge said. Nobody is pumping the numbers on negative comments towards the Bills like this fan base. Nobody is pumping numbers on a negative correlation relating to their team quite like the Buffalo Bills do. And Nick Wright is smarter than he looks, and he has built a massive following off of hating on the Bills and other teams that aren't the Chiefs. And luckily for him, of course, he is a diehard Chiefs fan from Kansas City, and he just kind of rises to the height of his career as the Chiefs become the next great dynasty here. So it's all been just an absolute it has sucked from the perspective of being against that guy because he has the opportunity to be right a lot because the Chiefs are always going to be in it. And everybody outside of them, you could argue, is not going to be on their level. So he can just run with these takes. But the thing that he just said the other day, once again, I was listening to Coward, and he always makes great points when it comes to things that happen that people don't want to address just because it seems like it's out of the ordinary, even though it's not. And one of those things is the fact that on average, every year, 6 new NFL teams make the playoffs, meaning 6 teams that were in it the prior year are no longer in it. And they were talking about out of the teams that are considered to be 1 or 2 seeds or in threatening the top of the conference, the Bills were the easy choice is what Nick Wright said. Bills were the easy choice to put a wager on in guessing that they'd be the ones to completely miss the playoffs. And one of his primary arguments was the Stefan Diggs thing. And then they'll talk about Allen regressing. Look at the numbers. It wasn't as sexy visually. The numbers certainly didn't regress. You go back to one Bengals game and look at, nobody knows more than me how absolutely dog shit, pardon me, that game was. And it's the last thing any of us saw. So of course that's what you go back to, and nobody played good in that game. But everybody now, Allen gets on the cover of Madden. Everybody amongst us, right? Everybody that we interact with, I thought it was the coolest thing of all time. Little kid in me, man, never been more stoked. But you go and look at the comment section, how undeserving Allen was to be on it. Everybody hating on it. I couldn't believe it. So it has become, and I don't know why, it has become the easy bar talk for you to bring up when you're talking about your hot take. The Bills have become the hot take. And I got to tell you, from my perspective, I like that a hell of a lot more than being Super Bowl or the field like they were last year. Because I never felt comfortable from the jump. And then you go out the way they did, destroy the Rams, who at that point we thought were still a Super Bowl team, destroy the Titans, who at that point were the number 1 seed in the AFC the prior year. We still thought they were great. I had gone on record on my show and said, were the expectations not high enough? That's what my quote was. And you look back in hindsight, and my God, it was never fair to these Bills. So if we're going to talk about regression, the only thing that I think has regressed is the expectations for this team. And I love that because right now they are in a prime situation to fly under the radar while the Jets are the new sexy toy. The Dolphins all of a sudden are the new toy, right? And then you have the Chiefs and the Bengals, of course, that are always going to get the pub. This is a perfect time. Like you said earlier, back to your point on the darkest before the dawn, Judge, it's the perfect striking opportunity when all of a sudden everybody thinks you're just about dead. You're right there. And they are. I mean, that's the other thing, too. They're right there. If you think that they're still not there in regard to a roster, then you have not been paying attention in the slightest this offseason.
Yeah, and to your point, too, you said the popular bar talk is that the Bills are going to regress this year, and that's because 99% of people consume national media. They listen to Colin Cowherd. They listen to Nick Wright. They listen to Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max. They're not listening to local content creators. They're not listening to, some of the more like in-depth, podcasts and things like that. They're listening to what's ever on the car radio. They're listening to what's ever on the television, at the gym or at the bar or whatever. And it's these very shallow conversations. It's these very shallow topics. Like you mentioned, Kyle Hurd and Jason McIntyre were going all in on the Buffalo Bills should be trying to unload Stefan Diggs. And I've heard a couple of people mention it this offseason, but they're not bothering to do the research to, number one, see that contract is absolutely unmovable. The Buffalo Bills cannot move on from Stefan Diggs the next 2 seasons. They'd be better off pulling the Phoenix Suns Jay Crowder and just telling Stefan Diggs to stay at home, because they're better off just letting him sit at home than they are trying to unload that contract. And there are other people who are like, well, he's about to hit the cliff. He's 30 years old. I don't think people have realized this with Stefan Diggs. I don't think there's anyone in the National Football League that works on his craft more than Stefan Diggs. Where he's come from the time he was a 5th-round draft pick at Maryland to his time in Minnesota, I think he might have been playing his best football the last 2 years. And he's almost 30, 28, 29 years old. He's packed on 15 pounds of muscle. He's added elements to his game. Like, he's literally getting better. He's not going to be one of those wide receivers.
And he doesn't get hit.
And he doesn't get hit. He's not going to be one of those wide receivers who hits 30 years old and falls off a cliff. I think Stefan Diggs could be balling out till he's 34, 35 years old. Like, that's just the way that he takes care of himself. He went off to Paris for Fashion Week, right? He brought his personal trainer with him. Like, he literally paid to have his personal trainer come out to Paris with him so he can work out while he's out there at Fashion Week. So he's one of those guys he's not going to fall off a cliff. His contract is untradeable. He's an absolute competitor. He keeps everyone around him honest. Josh Allen is the kind of guy, he's like a golden retriever, right? Like, nothing phases Josh Allen. Stefan Diggs yelling and screaming in Josh Allen's face is not something that's going to phase Josh Allen. It's not something that's going to offend Josh Allen's sensibilities. It's not something that's going to want to make Josh Allen want to trade Stefan Diggs. Josh Allen said it on the Bustin' with the Boys podcast. He loves that stuff. He absolutely loves that Stefan Diggs calls him out in that stuff. There's no better match than the two of them. But just because they're not on the S Side for Kids cover hugging each other, people want to make a big deal about it because it's shallow conversation. It's shallow narratives. And that's what's pushed by a lot of these networks like ESPN and Fox. That's what 99% of the people, unfortunately, consume on a daily basis.
I'm so glad you're saying this, by the way, because everybody here's Diggs is a victim of his own competitive nature. If you look back at the 2 exits for these Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, what's the first 2 images you think of? You think it's Stefan Diggs staring out at Arrowhead, that classic photo. You think of the photo of Stefan Diggs with his hands up in the air on the sidelines against the Bengals, which everybody was bringing in Josh Allen's personal life on that. I mean, everybody's got their own. It's almost like a fisher's towel or a fisherman's towel. Oh, I heard from so-and-so's bartender's barber that Diggs found out about, Allen blew a tire in the car that morning and he was all upset. He came into the game. I mean, I've heard 1,000 different things. And the one thing that he gets grilled for is, I'm sorry, guys, did you not watch that Bengals game with your hands up in the air saying, what in the absolute hell is this? And I went on record immediately afterwards when everybody was ripping on Diggs, saying that he was getting up in Allen's grill. And what do you want him to do? The whole year, the expectations of winning a Super Bowl, winning 13 games, overcoming all the adversity that they had to end the year like that. You want him to just sit on the sidelines with a cup of Gatorade, wait for the clock to strike 0 and hit the bus? No way. I want to see him sick to his stomach like he was in the Chiefs game, absolutely infuriated with what was going on like he was in the Bengals game. I understand that not everybody else shows it, and I understand that everybody else feels it. They might not express it the way Diggs does, but I love seeing the emotion because, frankly, in that Bengals game, there was a lack thereof when it came to that. You couldn't even tell if they showed up to that game, much less belonged in it. And Diggs was on the sidelines letting you know that he was not sitting well with what had just happened. And you look at what he has brought to this team and what he came in here to do. He left the situation with the Vikings. They had just gone to an NFC championship with Case Keenum. He left that situation to further not just his personal success, but his overall legacy when it comes to what the team in which he played for had accomplished. That's why he wanted to go play for a quarterback like Josh Allen. And the reason he's acting like he did, after the Bengals game there is because the expectations are higher than when you're playing with Kirk Cousins. And that is what he was after. And when you have a moment like that where it doesn't result in what you're going after, that is what it's going to ultimately conclude with. And the fact that still image, which to this day we have no idea what it was, who cares? All we have to know is look at the scoreboard, watch that game, and understand that anything he was mad about in the given moment was 100% justified. We are bringing that back up 4 months later because he comes in to a practice, misses it, yet comes back and everything's fine afterwards. He has been a victim of his own competitive nature, and I think that unfortunately for him, has been his biggest Achilles heel. It was the same thing in Minnesota. Everyone wants him to fail too, by the way. Everybody wanted him to come into Buffalo and just be the next Antonio Brown. That's what they wanted. They wanted him to be a complete dumpster fire because he left Minnesota in a way that was unconventional because he basically demanded his way out of there. Everybody wanted that. Now, right? What is it? 4 or 5 years later, when you get, it's kind of like the pizza party at school, when you get literally 1/80th of the pizza, the little slice there they put on the paper plate for you. When those people waiting on the downfall, as Stefan Diggs, get that one little slice, man, they are going to eat up every single bite of it. And that's what they've done. And that's why you're looking at a full month here of absolute nonsense. And the one thing I will say, though, about Diggs that I think he could be a little bit better with, but this is no fault of his because apparently this is the trend amongst mostly anybody with a popular following in the NFL. The cryptic social media anymore is insane. It's not just him. I mean, it is everybody. It's almost like they teach a master class on it to these guys on how to just completely screw with everyone. And I got to be honest with you, I don't pay attention to it because I wonder if it was me, how fun would it be to be laying in my whatever, at my multi-million-dollar house, bored as hell in the offseason saying, I could type out 6-7 words that literally have no meaning to anything. And I can completely alter the mindset or the take or whatever I'm feeling at the particular moment as a fan in a tap of a button. I could have a whole half being on one side saying this, a whole half on the other side being that. And I think part of what he kind of thrives on is the fact that this is all happening. Only he knows what's going on. And I think part of it really motivates him. So as much as it might frustrate us to see the cryptic tweets and him not coming out and kind of putting it to bed, there's part of me, I think, that he kind of gets off on it. And it might be good for us when it comes to, being a fan of this team.
Well, Z, I mean, let's be real. We had all of Bill's Mafia and half of the national media believing DeAndre Hopkins was coming to Buffalo because he tweeted out a Instagram clip of Bob Marley's Buffalo Soldier.
Yeah, and he went somehow that for a weekend, and that was a big thing too. Yeah,
and that absolutely meant he was coming to Buffalo, and that because he was in Toronto, and that's a spitting distance to Buffalo, New York. That of course he's going to come play here in Western New York. Yeah, no, it's insane. The whole situation's been insane. I mean, people talk about Stefan Diggs, and they want to sit there and be like he's getting old. Don't you think that plays a role in why he's so frustrated about the fact that they haven't won yet? Is the fact that he knows his runway is getting shorter and shorter, that his opportunity to winning a championship is getting shorter and shorter. And if you watch his interview on The Shop, he literally talks about when he raised his brother Trayvon, when his dad died at a young age, that his legacy and him cementing himself is everything to him. He literally thrives in the identity that he wants to be, transcendent, So for a guy like him, last year was not good enough, especially, and like you guys are saying, the performance on the field was less than lackluster.
It was abysmal.
Yeah. So the fact that happened on top of the fact that they went from playoff caliber all over the building to then championship caliber. And you go to the AFC Championship where you had one brain fart away from making it to what most people would believe they probably are going to win the Super Bowl that year because they were the best team, to then quote unquote shitting the bed the very next year. I can get why he's upset. It makes a lot of sense for a guy who cares as much as he does. So, and the other thing, and I've heard people say this, people are like, oh, Josh Allen, does he care enough? He's taking it off. Like he's out with Haley Steinfeld, does he care? What do you want? What choice do you want him to care too much? Do you want him to not care at all? Do they have to fit in the middle? Like, what is the framework for the NFL athlete to fit the narrative for a fan? Because they either care way too much, i.e. Stefan Diggs, or they don't care at all, like Josh Allen, which both of them are absolutely ridiculous in the fact that Josh Allen, who had one of the greatest ascensions of a quarterback in NFL history, from being a JUCO to Wyoming quarterback to breaking records and changing the narrative of him being an inaccurate quarterback, to Stefan Diggs, who came out of Maryland, who was a nothing burger of a wide receiver, who now is going to cement himself and potentially be in the Hall of Fame one day. So it's either one thing or another, but you can't, they go back and forth for whatever fits their daily routine. And trust me, I'm sitting in Twitter spaces, which Steve told me I'm insane for doing so. Listening to the up and down, the ebbs and flows of what people's perspective on things is mind numbing.
Yeah, and the thing too about Josh Allen that makes him so great, and like he talked about it on the Bustin' with the Boys podcast. He's like, yeah, I pretty much don't throw, from the end of the season until we go to OTAs. He's like, and then I come back for training camp every year and I test the best I've ever tested. Right, like every year I set new personal records, and I get back into shape within 1 or 2 weeks. I don't think people realize what made Josh Allen so special, because you have all these 4 stars, these 5 stars coming out of high school. And I see it now because I coach high school basketball. There are coaches now that force you into one sport. They force you into one lane, and you need to play that sport. You're a baseball player, you got to play only baseball. You're a basketball player, you got to play only basketball. You're a football player, oh, it's only football. Your summers are spent at 7-on-7 camps. Your falls are spent playing football. Your winters are spent in the weight room. Your springs are spent, doing the 7-on-7 stuff. It's just football, football, football. And Josh was like, no, my parents weren't like that. My parents let me play baseball. They let me play basketball. They let me swim. He talks about how he was a competitive swimmer, and all of those things made him into like the well-adjusted athlete that he is. You don't see Josh Allen played a whole season on a broken elbow, like literally, like a torn UCL. Anyone else in the National Football League, their season would have been over after that hit he took in the Jets game. But he has been one of the most durable players in football. He has played through some insane injuries, and he's able to do so because, and he mentioned, he doesn't get those soft tissue injuries because he doesn't live in a gym like some of these guys. He's not overdoing it like some of these guys. He's not burning himself out emotionally and mentally. So whatever works for whatever player, you got to respect that as long as the performance on the field matches up. And for Josh Allen, like you can pick a thing here, or you can pick a thing there, but at the end of the day, at worst, he's a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. And people are in the comment section gonna be like, how dare you even say he's 4 or 5? Like he's top, like, I'm just saying at worst, he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. So the proof is in the pudding. So all that stuff is just, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. The whole argument is it's Burrow has entered the conversation mainly because, one, that offense is just absolutely stacked. They have the best wide receiver core in the NFL, and I think Burrow has the potential to maybe be the best pocket passer to fill in the shoes of what Brady was for a long time there. Not to this sense of, you say something like that, and then of course you want to talk about blowing something out of proportion, but you look at what Burrow is. Allen is not Tom Brady. He is not Peyton Manning. He is quite different than just about anything we've ever seen. That's why he is referred to as a unicorn. That's why he is referred to as one of the top quarterbacks in some time, not because of the mechanics and the rhythmic, systematic throws that have gotten a lot of these guys a ton of success. It's because he's ultimately, we'll look back at this, guys like him, Lamar, Mahomes, man, we're watching the Steph Curry era of NFL quarterbacks here, where the game is just completely flipped on its head, where you are completely changing everything, how you run an offense, how you approach that offense from the defensive perspective, how many points are being scored in these games. It's insane. Allen is at the forefront of that. And when you look at the conversations about who's the best and whatever, I'm done with the arguments on Mahomes. I don't think, they're stupid to me, because we as Bills fans, there's nothing there. The argument there is you're just going to look like an idiot if you're going to try to argue that. I'm sorry. And I've said this 1,000 times. I've gotten grilled 1,000 times. I do not care. It is not an argument that we have any business getting involved with, because we just don't have the ammunition to back it up. I understand if you want to get into it with Burrow, and that's why last year sucked. But I also hate that argument too, because they're two completely different quarterbacks. And then you're just kind of coming down to the success of the team. And that's going to be a really hairy area to try and find a solution when it comes to one particular player. But when we're talking about Allen in particular, and we're talking about this offseason, and we're talking about what's facing these Bills, the one thing I always come back to here is we have wanted a team like this forever. And once again, back to what I was talking about with my own personal situation, these were legitimate pipe dreams. Looking at Drew Brees, Brett Favre, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger on the cover of Madden, I vividly remember as a kid just thinking, man, it's either going to be Fred Jackson or Willis McGahee, or that might be our best hope. When what's his face there from the Browns got on the cover, I thought maybe someday we'd get a lucky break here, and a Lee Evans would roll around or something. We'd win a contest and we'd get on the cover. It wouldn't be the quarterback, right? That is the reality here. Here is the reality. Okay. Like you mentioned earlier, when we went and met with the players and interviewed them and whatnot, and Josh Allen was there. There are players like Dawson Knox, who we talked to, who is the nicest guy I think I've ever met. But there are players like him who are big time in this league, right? And you can sit down and talk to him for a half an hour, and it's fine. No one's going to have any, no one's going to say anything. Allen is in another stratosphere. We're talking A-list. It would be like being at the Oscars and trying to get a sit down with, a really, really good co-star from a great movie, or getting a sit down with Tom Cruise and Leonardo DiCaprio. That is the world we've entered in. So you have to ask yourself, if you're like me, who lived through pure hell as a Buffalo Bills fan for that long, all you ever wanted was this. What comes with whatever this is issues that you could argue are first world NFL fan issues. This is what we are facing right now. These are what is happening now. These come with success, because nobody cares about anything happening off the field with anybody that's not going to be threatening the television ratings, the playoff picture, the Super Bowl, you name it. The Bills have cemented themselves to the point where Allen is now on the cover, and Allen is, for whatever reason, why anybody cares about this, I'll never know, but he is dating an actress. First of all, can we think back? If everybody wants to talk about that, which seems to be just it is like everybody, it's like being in high school all over again sometimes with this stuff. You look at that particular situation. Ask yourself this: you got a quarterback in the position to where that is a reality. I'm sorry, but JP Lossman and Trent Edwards and EJ Manuel were not going to be at the success level, the notoriety level, whatever, to be on the cover of Madden, to be out hanging out with A-list celebrities. Eventually, this is what happens when you are cemented into that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So we are facing these issues, right, where Diggs is becoming a story because the Bills are good. Allen is being ripped to shreds as far as a regression is concerned. That's because the Bills are good. We are not used to these things. So when we see Allen on the cover of Madden, people are like, oh, I'm scared now, we're cursed. Or we see him dating a celebrity. Oh, he's going to be too distracted. We can't have him out on the town on dates. We can't have him living a life. We can't have him out going out to dinner. We have football to play. The reality of the situation here is, whenever you think something like that, you got to take a step back. Like for me, like I've always wanted to interview Josh Allen when I get the opportunity to be around him. I've come to the realization it's not going to happen.
You were so close. You were so close. That video is iconic. Iconic.
And the reason, Judge, that particular moment almost happened is because Allen was still on the rise. He was the big buzz, but it wasn't lock him in top 3 quarterback. Now, the way I look at it, when I'm around him and I know, man, he's right there, I come to terms with that. And I told the supervisor there that we were interacting with, because he always feels bad when we can't talk to him. And I said, dude, I would be upset, but at the same time, man, the fact that we have a guy playing quarterback that is at the stature in which he's at, to where even in the same room as him, I'm not going to have the opportunity to sit down and talk with him because he is that big. He is that good. I literally told him, I've been waiting for this my whole life. I will never be mad about it. I will never be mad about it. I'll never be mad about anything happening here, the good or the bad, because a lot of the bad, so to speak, is just a lot of BS like we're witnessing right now that is being talked about for the sake of conversation because they are relevant. So you look at all these things happening and you have to just say to yourself, one, is it even a big deal? And you quickly realize none of it is. Absolutely none of it is. Two,
I think he just froze.
I really want to know what 2 is. Should we make a guess as to what 2 is?
yeah.
Oh, I got him.
To round it all out, though, all I'm saying is to put a nice big bow on it. Anytime you see, and I have to do this with myself sometimes, when you see the next article about Diggs, or when Diggs has a bad game this year, and they immediately go back to this occurrence, which will happen. You will see something brought up, bare minimum, a handful of times this coming year. When you see something that you personally are not used to, because there's been no reason to get used to it over the last 20 years prior to this, step back and say to yourself, there's a reason this is all happening. It's because everything has been trending upward. And on top of that, all the stuff that is happening is not. There are so many things going on with these organizations in all of sports that are just a complete sham, right? That are from a fan base perspective, it's got to be an absolute bitch to deal with. Like being a Packers fan last year, I could not imagine going through what Aaron Rodgers dragged them through for 2 years there. It must have been a miserable experience. If the worst thing that we're dealing with is a media barrage of weird articles about a 8-hour occurrence on a random OTA out of this entire tenure here with McDermott, Bean, Allen, and Diggs, we are doing pretty damn well as Bills fans as it sits right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's funny. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day too, just speaking about like Josh Allen. Like, honestly, I was surprised when I was scrolling through Twitter and I started seeing all those pictures and clips of Michael Rubin's 4th of July white party. I was honestly surprised Josh Allen was not there. Because that's the level of celebrity that Josh Allen has attained now. But my wife is like a huge Jonas Brothers fan. Like whenever Nick Jonas or Joe Jonas pop up in a commercial or they are on the radio, like the hair on my wife's arm like sticks up. Right? It's kind of unnerving, right? But she looked at me the other day when I was watching the Bus with the Boys podcast on YouTube, and it's funny enough watching it on YouTube, and then the ad that comes on YouTube is Josh Allen's Gillette commercial, and I'm just like glued to the television. My wife looks at me and goes, you look at Josh Allen the way I look at Nick Jonas. And I'm like, oh, creep. That's creepy. You're right. I do look at Josh Allen the way that you look at Nick Jonas. It is kind of creepy. So that was kind of sort of an unsettling moment for me. And he was talking in that interview too about how like he likes when people come up, say hello to him, but he would prefer they not. Like I have, like whenever I see a Buffalo Bill in public, I usually walk up to them, approach them, say go Bills. Like I've seen Derek Anderson, Raymond McLeod. I've run to Lee Smith before. I've run into Steve Johnson, the most chill guy in Mafia, by the way. And I'll just say hello to them and like it's super chill. If I ever saw Josh Allen in public, I probably would pass out or run in the other direction. I don't even think I would have the confidence level to even approach him and say hi. So yeah, it is like as you said, like this is not JP Lossman, this is not Trent Edwards, this is not like who was the most famous Buffalo Bill during the drought era?
That's
like,
what I'm saying. I can't think of one.
Stevie Johnson might have been the dude, right? Or
Patrick.
Chris Sims the other day on his podcast a couple weeks ago, they drafted the all-time teams for all 32 teams. Brian Moorman was on the team. Okay. That right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can't think of one. To your point, I cannot think of one. It was probably T.O. for a year, I guess. I don't know.
They gave the man the key to the city.
Yeah.
He didn't really do anything.
Exactly. My mom was first in line at the mall and got interviewed on the news, basically in her pajamas, to buy the T.O. jersey when it dropped, because that was the biggest thing anybody could have in Rochester, New York at the time. And you look back on it and you're like, my God.
It's magic, but that's also kind of a novelty more than it is stardom.
Yeah, it came about afterwards, right?
And it also became about much more to an extent afterwards as well.
Right.
But there's so many things that you could get easily frustrated with, and that's why I do understand it with people sometimes. I think you're so used to this team. I was like, Rico put it perfectly the other day. I was talking with him about this exact topic, and he's like, he pretty much said I think a lot of the assumption is like Allen just goes home and eats chicken wings, right? After practicing, and then goes back to play football again. Like it's not what we have currently is a group of guys that are beyond just Buffalo, and it's tough to realize that sometimes because of how small knit the community is, and that's what makes it so great. But we have guys that are world renowned guys now, and I think that takes some getting used to, and that's why a lot of this is kind of tough to adjust to sometimes. But at the same time, it's what comes with the territory, and this is territory you absolutely want to be in.
Well, like Steve, you were saying earlier, if the bickering Bills, the Bills of the 90s are on social media, if fans knew what the Bills of the 90s were truly getting into and it wasn't all football, you'd have a dramatically different feel about that team and what they did and what they partaked in. I mean, Josh Allen, like you were saying, and I don't think it can be reiterated or said. You said it eloquently. Josh Allen is a star. I mean, my one thing when I'm going to training camp with my wife, I just want to get a picture. I want my son. I want Josh to hold my son and just get a photo. Like, I don't even care about me. Like that for me is, yeah, that's like the coolest thing in the world. Like he is. He's like a superstar at this point. And I think that comes with the territory of like Bills fans were conditioned to be losers for the longest time. Now that we're winning, it's almost like it's such a weird occurrence to have a very good team and a stud quarterback, because we've never, since the 90s, haven't had anything close. We didn't sniff this. We didn't know this life. It's kind of like that time when you're younger, you're like a nerdy kid, and you start dating the really good looking chick, and everybody's like, yo, who's he dating? And you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm just going for the ride. Like, that's what we're here now. Like we finally have the hot chick. We've got the Josh Allen, and we're on it for the ride, trying to figure out what in the hell is happening and how to acclimate ourselves to this weird experience. But I think the Bills are in a good spot. I think, the fans will get used to this even more as it goes down the road. And Patriots fans are having to figure out what it's like to be complete losers, and that's fun to watch while it's happening.
Oh, that's great.
But what I will do is I want to finish this show off with one specific topic. I asked this to a couple guys a few weeks back. We're heading into training camp in 2 weeks. Who is the one player to you guys, whether new or existing, that you are honing in on, that you are super focused, that you think is either pivotal for an impact or something that you just want to see what they are going to put out onto the field come training camp for this coming season?
For me, and this is like this is unusual, because usually like I'll pick a skill position player. Like I could pick Kyrie Elam because I really want him to win the CB2 job. I could pick James Cook because like he's a flashy off the skill position, but I'm going to go with the big dude, right? I'm going to go with O'Cyrus Torrence, our second round pick at right guard. And I've been sort of hammering this home on our show, the Air Raid Hour, the last couple of weeks. I think he's one of the 10 most important Buffalo Bills, not named Josh Allen, to their success this season. Christian Wilkins, Quinnen Williams, Chris Jones, Justin Simmons, you name it. There are interior defensive linemen who have given this football team absolute fits over the last 3 years. Interior pressure is one of the things that has sort of torn this offense apart or given this offense struggle. So now you have a player in O'Cyrus Torrence with a very powerful base who on one hand can maybe slow down the Chris Joneses of the world, the Christian Wilkins of the world, the Christian Barmores of the world, the Quinnen Williams of the world. And on the other hand, too, a team that has struggled in short yardage situations, that has relied on their quarterback, that their quarterback has gotten some unnecessary hits taken because they utilize him like a fullback, like Mike Allstott on third and short. Now you have a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence, and even though Spencer Brown has his trouble in pass protection, you have a right side in O'Cyrus Torrence and Spencer Brown that you can maybe run behind. You can give the ball to Damian Harris. You can give the ball to Latavius Murray, and you can pick up the first down in short yardage situations a little bit more traditionally. So my eyes are going to be on O'Cyrus Torrence because I know that Ryan Bates is the veteran coming into this competition, but I so badly want O'Cyrus Torrence to be the right guard when we line up on Monday Night Football against the Jets.
That's an absolute great choice. And what a pick, honestly. After that second round concluded, and we went into that draft, I had never been more unsure of what the Bills were going to do and what they wound up being able to navigate. So just to put it out there, it's not my choice because it's just too easy of a choice, but to kind of piggyback off of what you just said, I want to just say before I give my player that I I don't think I've ever been more excited in my life to see an acquisition for the Buffalo Bills play like I am currently for Dalton Kincaid. I really have never been this stoked. Maybe it's because it's the first offensive player drafted in the first round since Josh Allen. We haven't had that opportunity. But, I mean, the upside that you're hearing about mixed in with the ability to even land him in the first place when they did, man, I couldn't be more excited. I want to kind of go in the almost exact situation that you just went with, but from the guy that's going to be going behind Osiris Torrance to try to get those short yardage. And that's why I'm going to go with Damian Harris. These Buffalo Bills have not had a running back of that type of nature probably since Fred Jackson. And you could probably say that this is even more so of a bruiser than he was. The Bills have constantly relied upon Josh Allen over the last, not over the last, literally since they drafted. And they've relied on him to do absolutely everything. But one of the crucial elements that they've relied on the most that you can tell is not going to be sustainable is making him a human battering ram in situations where most quarterbacks do not have to be subjected to that type of football. Every single time these Bills get in a short yardage situation or close to the end zone down in the in red zone situations, it's not a matter of is it going to be Josh Allen. It's a matter of either he's going to throw it or he's going to have to find a way to run it in. Now, with the mixture of James Cook, who once again, another guy that I just could not be more stoked to see because I just think he was disgustingly underutilized last year, and now he just simply can't be. And I think the flashes we saw were incredible. But you mix together what James Cook's going to bring to this team, and it's mostly, the flashy type running back experience that we're coming more used to outside of Derrick Henry. There really isn't that smash mouth guy in the league that you think of anymore. It's more of the finesse guy that you get involved in your pass game. And I can't wait to see that with James Cook. But now the reason I'm so excited to have Damian Harris in the mix is because when we get into a 4th and 1 situation or a 3rd and 2 situation, a goal line situation, there's 2 benefits to this. One, you actually have a guy that can get you those yards. I always thought Devin Singletary was underrated compared to the flack that he got, but the one thing that he was not going to do was get you those yards. It's just not the way that he was built to play the game, and the Bills, frankly, did not have the offensive line to give him, any additional help for a guy that is not a bruiser type running back. Damian Harris is that, and now not only do you have a guy that can get you those yards, but it also allows the opening for these Bills to get creative on offense in a spot in which I don't think they could before. Everyone knew what was coming in those short yard situations for these Buffalo Bills. They knew Josh Allen, to some capacity, was going to be getting the ball, whether he was going to roll out and throw it or he was going to be running it himself. Now you completely open up the playbook, and with that, throw the defense for a loop, giving them something that they have to respect and plan for going in. And even if they don't utilize it to the fullest extent, even if Damian Harris isn't running over guys left, right, and center, it's one element to this team that they did not have that you absolutely have to respect. Last season, nobody respected this Bills run game, and it showed. And when teams called their bluff, we saw, oftentimes Josh Allen had to throw a fade route down the sideline on a 3rd and short situation that just made no sense because that was all that was there. You were unable to open up that playbook and kind of throw the defense for a loop. I think Damian Harris brings that element. And the one thing that I am just stunned about, we were talking to Dawson Knox about things that were sticking out to him in camp. He said not only is Damian Harris probably the toughest tackle or one of the toughest tackles just as far as sheer power, but he told us that as far as just pure speed, he might be the fastest running back in the locker room. That is one thing that I was not expecting to hear. I was not anticipating to see this year. So if we're going to be able to mix that type of game with him as well, in addition to these short yard situations the Bills have been lacking in the running back locker room over the last couple of years, I can't wait to see how they utilize him. And hopefully that opens up things that we haven't seen, and it gets these Bills kind of, I don't want to say hump, but you could tell last year, even though the numbers were good, there were moments on this offense that were visually stagnant. You could just tell that it was hitting the skids, but Josh Allen would oftentimes just get him over it, doing literally God's work and figuring it out somehow. I think this one additional piece which I think is also very underrated, could be a big factor for the Bills this year. I'm really excited to see him play.
Yeah,
So I love both those.
If I never
sorry,
see it, no, if I never see a Josh Allen QB sweep again, I will be a happy man. Like I love Josh Allen running the football. Like if it's 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 5 and he drops back and there's nothing there and he can pick up the first down by running off script, awesome. It's first and 10 and the Buffalo Bills spread them out. 7 guys drop back into coverage and turn their backs and Josh Allen can get one-on-one with a linebacker. Cool, go for it. But 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, it should not just be, well, it's going to be a Josh Allen quarterback sweep. I never want to see that play in the playbook again. I believe that's the play that got him hurt 2 years ago in Tampa Bay as well.
Well, that's to your point real quick there, Judge. It's just that when you're talking about Allen, everybody always focuses on the present moment, and nobody wants to talk about what all of this type of play builds up to longer into your career. And we know that with Allen and the arm strength and the ability to throw the ball exclusively, he could play in this league as long as he wants if he's healthy. And Bean and McDermott know it. How many times this offseason did they emphasize it? And I got to tell you, to their credit, they went out and made moves that emphasized exactly what they were talking about. And that's why I'm excited to see it, because I'm with you, Judge. Allen running the ball, I absolutely love to see it. But when I'm seeing 7, 8 designed runs a game in situations where you're kind of like, man, this just seems like a handful too many here. That's what I'm excited to kind of see make its way to the back burner and kind of eliminate itself from his game and extend his career even further.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the days of using Josh Allen as a battering ram need to be softened.
Well, he loves it too, guys. That's the other thing. I was just watching Mike Up on NFL Network once again, that clip where he just gets smoked on the sideline there, and he's like, I love it, because he's not going to not do it. That's the thing. You're going to have to get a guy like Damian Harris to do it for him, because even if you don't draw it up, Allen's going to do it. So getting him out of his own way is another massive thing too, to that point. Because, man, you can tell, like, the guy just loves getting in the trenches, playing hard-nosed football.
Well, did you hear Brandon Beane on Pat McAfee? They asked him, because Josh was going back and forth with, the medical team and the doctors about playing after that UCL injury. And Brandon said to Josh, they said, listen, you can play, but no unnecessary hits. You just can't do it. And so that game, after he said that, Josh went and lowered his shoulder into one of the players, and Brandon Beane called down to the sideline to the training staff and said, listen, you tell Josh, if he does it again, I'm pulling him. Josh, literally, the training staff looked at Josh, told him this. Josh looked at him and smirked and walked away. So, I mean, like, he's like a big kid, but it's almost like you got that old adage, like, you got to protect them from themselves. You really do with Josh Allen, because like he loves that aspect of like getting down and dirty as a quarterback.
Would that not have been great though, even though it would have sucked in the moment? But looking back on it, we would have been talking about a top 10 all-time Buffalo Bills Twitter moment if Josh Allen got benched in the middle of a game for running the ball. I mean, I can just see it now, and there's part of me that kind of wishes Bean made the call down just to see what that would have looked like.
Ty Dune would have loved that.
Jesus. Yeah. Click this article to find out what happened. No, with my guy, man, you touched on him, Z. I think Dalton Kincaid, 182 receptions is what we lost with Cole Beasley, right? And if Dalton Kincaid is in fact that 11.5, if he is that flex tight end, he's a wide receiver, whatever you want to call him, what all these media personalities have a knip shit about, us fan sites. My thing is, when it comes to this, he opens up stuff that the Bills just couldn't do last year. And obviously you saw with his UCL injury, the fact that he couldn't do certain short to intermediate throws, his arm just could not do it. It was just too painful, which is why you saw a lot more vertical passing game, because it was a lot more, it didn't really encumber Josh to the point where he felt he couldn't do it. That's why you saw that part of the game kind of become more prolific. I think you bring in a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who he's gonna get the free release. He's bigger, he's faster than a linebacker, he's going to be a general mismatch. But the big thing about it is just having that guy that Josh can turn to, because we saw last year, we had Jamison Crowder, and I think once we lost Jamison Crowder, I don't think people truly understood the gravity of losing him early in the season, because as much as we all wanted Isaiah McKenzie in training camp to be the guy, he just was never going to be. They asked too much of him, just like they asked too much of Gabe Davis. They asked too much of Isaiah McKenzie, and then we just didn't have anything, which is why at the end of the season, you saw Isaiah McKenzie, you saw John Brown you saw John Brown and Cole Beasley come back, because they were looking for an influx of either trust or juice or something to get that aspect of the game going. You bring in a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who can really stretch the middle of the field, can make defenses have to make a decision. They don't have, defenses can't just have the safeties sitting back all game. The linebackers have to make a legitimate decision as to how they're going to play the offense. I think if the Bills now have that aspect into their game, a guy that can really be moved all over the place, because you saw with Dawson last year where he was kind of helping with Spencer Brown and chipping on that right side. He wasn't really being utilized to his truest potential. He wasn't used over the middle. If you have a guy that can do that on a more consistent basis, that provides so much, because you saw, and you guys know this, outside of outside of Diggs and Davis, because Kumaro went down, there was no boundary receivers. So you couldn't flex them in. You couldn't do a whole lot on the inside of the field. There wasn't a lot to actually work with. So aside from this, I think this also gives Ken Dorsey a little bit of a pass, because I think what he did with what he had was more impressive than people give him credit. I think this is going to be a true test of Ken Dorsey's ability as an offensive coordinator, now that he has a full arsenal of weapons, but what Dalton Kincaid can actually be to this offense. So I think him being in this is going to be big time for Josh, but it's going to pay dividends for everybody included, specifically Stefan Diggs.
Yeah, and you know what? The other thing, too, is people spend more time arguing with Cole Beasley on Twitter, not enough time remembering just how great he was to this team. And the fact that he was an all-pro at a position where, when you look at the guy, if you saw him at the gas station, you would never believe the guy was an NFL player. You would never believe that.
You believe he was a rapper.
Yeah, which he is, of course.
No, you would think he was working at the gas station.
Maybe even all I know is you wouldn't think he'd be an all-pro slot. I mean, I think people, the way that it ended with Beasley, there's unfortunately just a lot of people who had problems there, and so I think with that, you overlooked just how big of a piece he was to this team. But boy, when you saw him and his presence over the middle in that type of game get eliminated, you clearly could tell last year in several circumstances just how much they missed him. And if Kincaid, like you said, Thomas, if he is what they're continuously telling us that he is, and it's that slot presence and more, we're back to that. And what that was the best team that these Bills have had success-wise under Josh Allen.
Has anyone deemed Dalton Kincaid swole Beasley yet?
I've heard it.
Have you heard? I feel like I've heard that. All right. It's not an original thought.
No, well, here's the other thing about it is, like you were saying, with the ability to go back to what we had, that was when our offense was at its best, matriculating down the field, and that kind of cliche death by 1,000 cuts. That's the type of offense that allows the defense to be really good, instead of where Josh was doing a 3 or 4 play drive and then defense is back up there, no rest, and you kind of just have to take your lumps. Having that ability to, kind of elongate, have 15, 16, 17 play drives pays dividends for everybody involved. Yeah. It's just an easier game to play. And instead of having a run game, that also bleeds the clock a little bit, which works to the Bills' favor, because they don't have the ability to, bleed it like a traditional running style game. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
The one thing too, that I think is a key, like if Dalton Kincaid comes in and is an immediate, I mean, man, you got to think, even if he's like 75% of Beasley, what that does. But what I look at too is kind of what he brings to the team outside of just him catching the ball and getting down the field. Gabe Davis, by far, was the biggest impact he's ever been on this team, when Cole Beasley was the main primary target over the middle, and it allowed Gabe Davis to free himself up down the field. Gabe Davis kind of showed us last year that maybe he wasn't ready for that situation. Maybe it's just not going to happen. But what I do know is that when he does get his his opportunities in an offense that isn't just reliant on him and him alone outside of Stefan Diggs, man, he can really impact this offense. So if Kincaid can come in and just be that guy to some capacity, you got to think about this too, guys. When talking about Kincaid, just him being out there and having above average rookie year, how much that just adds to what this offense didn't have last year. We get caught up a lot in thinking that this offense is more talented than it is. I think simply because of Josh Allen. This offensive roster, especially when it comes to the weapons surrounding Josh Allen compared to the AFC, is it's not. It's tough to make the argument sometimes that there is linear to some of these rosters. Now, you're not playing it on paper, but you look at some of these teams compared to what the Bills have on offense, and you kind of think to yourself, man, somebody's going to have to step up, and they couldn't have gotten Kincaid at a more perfect time. And I think just him getting in there and having a successful rookie year, what that's going to do to this offense is going to be incredible.
Well, Z, you said it yourself that nobody cared about our running game, right?
No.
Nobody feared our running game. And that's the same with parts of our offense, right? I mean,
Sure.
You saw they knew that Dawson Knox was not going to be running routes. They knew he was going to be sitting on the line. So who else was there? Quentin? Nobody feared him at all. And then once you got beyond Diggs and Davis, they knew they weren't throwing it to Shakir. Isaiah McKenzie was just, flash in the pan once a game. And then the drop off was, it was stark. So like you said, what did they fear out of the Bills offense? They feared stopping Josh Allen from running, and they feared Stefan Diggs. That's was it.
When you talk about a regression of Josh Allen, it's like, I mean, as you can see, just stuttering here because it truly, you look at what that team has accomplished. Like last year in particular, if they have a situation like, Miami underwent or Baltimore underwent, where it just seemed like everybody that was an impact on that team, wasn't around or it was having on and off injury issues. If that happens to this team last year or at any point with Josh Allen, the makeup of this team, you look at the raw, like they were just ranked, I think, from the Athletic, the third best offensive roster, or the third best overall roster in the league. If you just simply remove Josh Allen from that, you have to wonder if it even makes the top 10 when you're looking at especially this offense. So just him alone, he doesn't need much. We've seen that every time, and that's the other thing that gets me excited too. Every time that they have added someone for Allen, he's had a better year and a better year. It started with Calvin Benjamin and Zay Jones. My God, I mean, good luck, J.A., right? And then all you do is add John Brown and Cole Beasley. Better, of course, with Diggs. This is the biggest step up since then. So if we're looking at the chart there, all you can assume is that it's going to be a trend upward.
I think you're sleeping on Andre Holmes a little bit, but I'll let it slide.
You might be right.
You didn't like Rod Streeter?
Who?
Rod Streeter. You got to remember Rod Streeter.
I don't think Rod Streeter ever saw a regular season snap.
Deontay Thompson. Greg Salas. Come on.
What about what are your Deontay Hardy? I think is kind of flying a little bit on it. I'm interested to see what happens there. I think that was another back to what we were talking about earlier. Judge, you were kind of emphasizing on this as far as easily being able to knock down on the Bills for these big, so to speak, negatives, but not really focusing on the minor positive that have really built up this offseason. That's one, I think, among all of them that is insanely underrated. Sometimes I even forget the Bills went out and got him. He's another part of this. So
you figure all the plays that went to Isaiah McKenzie last year now can go to Deontay Hardy. And I think most people, most pundits that you would talk to would say, oh, Deontay Hardy is a significant upgrade over Isaiah McKenzie. And you think too, all the plays that went to guys like John Brown last year. Mm-hmm. Now you're throwing Trent Sherfield into the mix as well. And so the Buffalo Bills have Stefan Diggs, who they're going to funnel their offense through, but they have now Damian Harris out of the backfield, Latavius Murray out of the backfield, two guys who have produced in the National Football League, James Cook, Naheem Hines, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Deontay Hardy, Gabriel Davis, Khalil Shakir going into year two, Quentin Morris, who's flashed. And that's the thing, is a lot of people wanted the Buffalo Bills to pursue DeAndre Hopkins, because they wanted another alpha to take the pressure off of Stefan Diggs. That was the big thing, is we got to take the pressure off of Stefan Diggs. We got to get Stefan Diggs more open looks. We got to make it so they can't put their number 2 corner on Stefan Diggs, but then also put the safety on him and then put their number 1 corner on Gabriel Davis. Well, now you have a healthy Gabriel Davis. You have Knox, you have Kincaid, you have all these other weapons I just mentioned. Now it's all on Ken Dorsey. If you're Ken Dorsey, you don't have that secondary alpha like a DeAndre Hopkins to take the pressure off of Stefan Diggs. So it's going to be up to Ken Dorsey to create an offense that rotates in all of these different guys and all of these different elements. And it keeps defenses on their toes so they can't completely focus on Stefan Diggs.
The one other thing too, and we've been focusing a lot on offense here, but you look at a lot of the things that have built up over this offseason that kind of lead to where people are talking about betting, taking short, going short on the Bills stock here. Go ahead and look at a healthy Bills defensive roster right now. And I mean, my God, in this Bills defense, obviously, there's moments when they're struggling, but under McDermott, it's been a top 5 defense through and through. You look at the health of this team coming into this year. Once Von Miller returns, whenever that, is hopefully in the first quarter of the season, you'd hope, or even sooner. But the one guy that stands out a lot to me there is Trey White being completely healthy. I don't think he was comfortable coming back last year when he did. So you get that in the mix with Poyer and Hyde back together in tandem, which was just, it wasn't out there. What was it? 2 games last year? Not even that was together last year with Von Miller back. Right. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like what you just told me there when you were kind of going through the offensive roster there, it's better than you think. There's a lot of big names on a lot of other AFC teams that kind of trump what the Bills have going on offense. Good luck finding bigger names and better talent on the defensive side, though, when it comes to these Bills. And that's the other thing that has me like really excited going into this season is the health of this defense. If they can stay healthy, they probably, amongst all these top tier contenders in the AFC, they might not have the best offense, but when you line up against the majority of those guys, I'd take the Bills defense over just about anybody.
I mean, if you think about it,
you're talking about. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, last year that Buffalo Bills defense, not one of the 17 games, not one, because Trey White started the year on the PUP list. Not one of those games did the Buffalo Bills have all 11 of their defensive starters on the field at the same time. Not once.
And don't you remember, remember there was that period of time where Poyer would kind of play a game, then he'd have to miss one, and then he'd come back, and then I remember the game with Baltimore, for instance, when Poyer had the interception to seal the game. You look back, there's moments that you forget about as time goes on, but you look back at just what the significance of one player adds to a particular game in the grand scheme of it, and that's just Poyer, right? You're talking about Von, the healthy Poyer, fully healthy Poyer, Micah, and Tre'Davious White. This Bills D last year held serve probably better than we give them credit for based on what they were walking out there most of the time. That's the thing you look at right now, and you're thinking, man, you look at the addition of Leonard Floyd, and it's just like that's almost an afterthought based on what they have coming back on their own roster. That's the part right now to me that, man, if they can stay healthy, that's going to be their advantage over everybody else. Maybe they don't have that wide receiver too, right? Like everybody else seems to all of a sudden have, or maybe they don't have that top running back that you could argue some of the top teams in this league right now seem to have, including, in the AFC surrounding them. But man, like I said, that defense compared to the rest of the top of the conference, you'd have a real tough time arguing anybody but the Bills if they're healthy.
Right. And the one thing that's not even mentioned is the fact that with Tre'Davious White, he's never had a complimentary good quarterback too. We've been searching for that for years, whether it's been a veteran guy like a Josh Norman or an EJ Gaines, or now when you got Kyer. But I mean, Kyer never even got that chance until the end of the season. And then he started really showing, and the analytics on him show that he's actually very good. So to now have Trey potentially fully back, alongside also having a very good CB2. And even if it's not him, let's say if it's Christian Benford, then you also have both your safeties back. And we haven't even mentioned Taylor Rapp, alongside the fact of likes of another year of a very good Matt Milano.
Yeah.
You're talking a bona fide stud defense. And that doesn't even include the likes of Puna Ford the fact that obviously you said Leonard Floyd, when we get Von Miller back,
Yeah.
and the one guy who I've been saying all off season that I think is going to make the biggest step is Greg Rousseau.
Sure.
I think Greg Rousseau is in line to have a monster year this
I was
year.
just going to say last year he did. I was very confident with the addition of Von Miller that the fruits of bringing him in were going to be felt more on the roster itself, not necessarily what he did personally on the field. I think you saw that with Von Miller, and I think there were plenty of times where you could say Ed Oliver definitely had his best year too, and that's why they decided to bring him back maybe over at Tremaine Edmonds. And back to that point, we're talking about this defense loaded up. They just lost a first-round pick of their own due to salary cap situation, and we're at the end of talking about the defense here, and that's just coming up. I mean, that's what this Bills D has going for them. And like you said, Thomas, if what we saw last year, the trajectory of Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau in particular, like what you're on, I'm kind of on that too, where it seems like he's finally starting to hit that curve up. Man, the ascension of the young guys in addition with some of the best veteran players in the league on defense. That's where you're not gonna hear when everybody's talking about the BS on the main stage. It's because this stuff isn't sexy to talk about, because it's not, unless you're talking about a quarterback or a top wide receiver. It's not gonna get it's not gonna get the clicks or the views or whatever. But when you're getting down to the nitty gritty of this defense, man, I mean, sometimes even us just talking about it right here, I forget sometimes what they're going to be trying out on the field this year compared to even what it was just a season ago.
Well, that's the nice thing about having a guy like Josh Allen, right? Like that was the thing for the Patriots. Patriots took a lot of swings, a lot of misses, but a lot of swings. Now the Bills can do that. Josh Allen allows you to maybe take swings on traitsy guys like Greg Rousseau, who, maybe didn't have a lot of, experience. He was a safety and wide receiver out of high school. He had a little limited action.
Greg Rousseau was?
Dawson Knox, another guy.
Yeah,
Dawson Knox, another guy who was a college quarterback, a guy that was very traitsy and very athletic, converted another position. I mean, you're seeing those type of guys and you're seeing the Sabres doing very similar things too, because
I'm excited about the Sabres, by the way. As a not a gigantic hockey guy, I am stoked.
You should be. They're going to be very good this season.
I'm very excited.
You'll have to join us for one of our Sabres watch parties. But that being said, before we go till 2 hours, because Steve yelled at me and didn't want to go to 2 hours, so I think we could probably go 30 minutes real quick before we blink our eye. Guys, first thing I want to do real quick, I'm going to put this up on the screen. Today, Bills Mafia, man, we lost a very, very special kid, Eddie Merrick. A lot of us have been watching his battle, watching for a little boy, an 8-year-old boy, a son, struggle. I know for Steve and I, we're both fathers. It hits different. It's very close to home. When I found out, I hugged my son tonight extra close, and it's tough. It's tough to lose a family member. It's even tougher to lose somebody so innocent, so full of life and happiness, and had everything in front of them and fought so valiantly and strong. But the one thing, and I try to end my show every week with a positive note. If everybody can just take a little bit of what Eddie was towards life, take what his mantra or his vision for being of a person, being so positive amongst all. I mean, my life is not that bad. We all have our moments that can be bad. You look at it and you're like, dang, that stinks. This kid should have had the worst mindset and outlook about everything. He had the worst hand dealt to him that anybody could get dealt. This kid had every medical thing that could possibly go wrong in his life from the get-go go wrong. And throughout all of it, he still remained positive. He fought harder than most people will ever fought in their entire life to just live. So for me, for him, for his father, Nick, who is, I can't even fathom what emotional roller coaster, emotional heartbreak he's going through. For them, be positive, live life as if you were through Eddie's lens, and live a life that is, better for everybody else. Because man, this kid fought so damn hard and didn't get to enjoy the life. So I hope the Bills pay some tribute to this kid. I hope, the Bills in general fight like hell, like he fought like hell every single day. I'm going to leave it there. Gentlemen, if you guys want to let people know where they can find your fantastic content.
Yeah, just to speak on Eddie here real quick, just the absolute embodiment of perseverance and the absolute embodiment of joy. Like, again, to face the things that he faced with the smile on his face, like he always did. And it was absolutely incredible. But you can find the Air Raid Hour every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time on the Cover One YouTube channel. So right here. And it's me, my co-host Dave Tilton, and we talk all things Buffalo Bills. We're going to be off for one more week, but then we're back July 17th for a little training camp preview.
Yeah, man, just terrible. I had a cousin pass away at 10 years old, and I watched firsthand watching a kid go through something like that. There is absolutely nothing worse. But the one thing that you do take away from it is exactly what you just said, Thomas, and it's same situation with my cousin that I got to see firsthand. Same thing that I live vicariously through Eddie here watching online is that, man, no matter what you got going on, I never saw that kid not in a happy mood, never not smiling. And the ability to do that, and no matter what age, is absolutely extraordinary. And the one thing I do think of the most here is his father, because his father, Nick, he was with him every second of every day, every step of the way. And you have to imagine for Eddie, as he was fighting there, that had to have been absolutely crucial. And I'm sure his father tonight is, it's got to be the toughest moment of his life. So thinking about him, because he seems like a really, really great guy, and you could tell he was one hell of a dad. So thoughts to their family there, because it's just sad. And there's no other way to put it. It's just terrible. Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on Monday nights, Smoke Breaks, where you can find me as far as my show is concerned, and then Twitter at Zbot tweets, I think it is. Yep. But of course, apparently that's dying, fellas. So if you're a big Threads guy now, at Zbot22, if you're going that direction, I don't know what's going on there. I open that app, so I don't even know what I'm doing. I feel old doing that. I love Twitter. People seem to hate it. I really hope it doesn't die, but if it does wind up perishing, you can find me there too.
At Zbot's Threads was taken.
At Zbot's Thread. Well, you want to know what it is, and this is
your Instagram handle.
Yeah. It's like, Zuck, give me, is that like, what are we doing? I can't change the handle. I can't add a banner picture. That's you guys notice. I don't know if you've been using it or not, but it's like, I feel like you could design that in a college like course. It feels probably like the most basic thing. Yeah, he probably did, but I don't know. I need another social media app. Like I need a hole in the head. So there's part of me that kind of hopes this doesn't catch on.
Well, gentlemen, I truly do appreciate you guys coming on tonight. Always an absolute pleasure. For in general with Bill's content, guys, we are getting very, very close to some, really interesting stuff. Not this stuff we've been drudging through for the last couple weeks. I don't know if Z will be here in Rochester. I know, Steve, you live in the other side of the country, but if you do come to training camp here in Rochester, a bunch of the Cover One guys will be there. Feel free to come up and say hello. Would love to say hi. We'll be giving all the best content for you guys. Make sure you get Cover One pass. But as for myself, you guys can find me every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Next week, we will be on at 8 p.m. Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn will be filling the 9 p.m. slot. They got some different stuff. Greg's all over the place because he's busy. But again, I truly appreciate it. My name's Thomas DeLoss. You can find me at the Thomas DeLoss. Like I said just a second ago about Eddie, guys, enjoy life. Be positive. Tell somebody you love them. If you haven't called somebody recently, give them a call. Tell them you're thinking about them. Tell them you love them. Tell them, that they matter, because you just never know when life is going to, or God's going to be calling your number. So do that. Otherwise, guys, I'm going to end it just like I always do. I love you all. Go Bills.
Thanks for having us, Thomas. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
The Bills make me wanna.